So I anticipate that this 15 minutes is going to be a lot different than really most of the cranial work that you've been doing for the rest of your time here, because this conversation is really going to be about the politics of HCPs and how to weave those into the politics of the communities in which they're implemented. So first of all, as a commissioner from here in Escambia County, I want to welcome all of you to our little slice of paradise, and so I'm glad that you chose us here at Escambia County to have this convention. We are very proud of our HCP out on Perdido Key. So I'll start with what will sound like the beginning of a 12-step program. My name is Doug, and I'm a Republican. So, but we have this weird kind of a dichotomy in the way we talk about politics in America, whereby if you're a Republican, then you're for making money and you're against the environment. And if you're a Democrat, of course, you're on the other side of that. Well, that false choice, that false dichotomy really came and hit home hard for us here in Escambia County with the BP oil spill. Up until the BP oil spill, we were kind of along those same lines where you've got the economy and the environment are two sides of a seesaw, and where one goes up, the other goes down, where one prospers, the other suffers. With the BP oil spill, Perdido Key was one of only two beaches really here in Florida. They've got 98% of the oil that made it to the beaches here in Florida. We saw not only our quality of life suffer as a result of it, but we saw the environment suffer, we saw our prosperity suffer. So with the lessons learned, and really I saw a cultural change on Perdido Key and in Escambia County in general, whereby we no longer look at the environment and the economy as two ends of a seesaw, but as two wings on the same aircraft. And if both of these wings aren't lifting, then we're crashing. So that really did change the paradigm, it changed the dialogue and the way that we talk about the environment here in Escambia County. I actually ran for office against an incumbent Republican, and I, running as a Republican in a primary in a very Republican community, ran on a platform of embracing the Habitat Conservation Plan that our HCP was put in place 2009-2010. For those that don't know, Tim Day is our HCP director and our environmental guy here in Escambia County. When I came into office, I told him, if you ever hear me at a podium somewhere and I misstate something with regard to the HCP, or I start doing something that is in some way prejudicial to the HCP, you have my permission and direction to come and grab me by the ear and yank me off the podium. Okay, so if I do mess up during the next 10 or 15 minutes and you see him grab me and yank me off my ear, you know that was directed. So what we did when we came in, our HCP came into place with much of the same kind of issues that you have in your community. For us, it is oftentimes referred to as the beach mouse plan. And I've heard a couple of other folks talk about what the particular species that is being protected by your HCP is. And I would caution you that while certainly from a scientific point of view, it is about a species, yours is about a spider, yours is about a bird, ours is about a mouse, the reality is that the name of that species is rarely in the title. The title is Habitat Conservation Plan. And when we talk about the habitat, and especially on Perdido Key, when we talk about our habitat, we're talking about the habitat for the Perdido Key beach mouse, for the Kemp-Ridley turtle, for the snowy plovers, but also for the human beings. And when we change that dialogue to talking about preserving the environment and preserving that habitat for all of the creatures, including those of us who walk around on two legs, then you actually see a change in the way people view it. So you move away from dialogue like that stinking beach rat, or that kind of thing, and all those you hear these negative terms that are oftentimes thrown out about, well, what do I care about some stinking spider in a cave somewhere? It really isn't just about some stinking spider in a cave somewhere. It's about preserving the environment. Now, the development class and those who spend an enormous amount of their personal capital, private capital to develop and build things, oftentimes are going to view an HCP as a list of constraints and the thou shalt nots, and it prevents them from doing the things that they want to do. And to some extent, that is actually pretty accurate. It does prevent you from being able to run willy-nilly and go do whatever you want. And if we stop the dialogue right there, then you'll always have this kind of conflict between preservation of the environment and development of the economy. So what we did here in Escambia County was to flip the dialogue and stop, and not just stop the hard work with the HCP. And I recognize that you guys as scientists, as environmentalists, for you, your big focus and your energy is on the HCP. That's only half of the solution. What we did out on Perdido Key, when we had the HCP in place since about 2010, was it, Tim, that it finally got approved? 14, okay, so the proposal was finalized in 9, and it was 14 before the plan was finally fully implemented. When we came along right after, so 2014 is when I got elected. In 2014, what we did was we then took a look at that, the HCP, not just as a list of things we're doing to protect the environment, but you look at that as your kind of your parameters. This is your left and right of arc, are the military terms that we use for it. But this is the parameters under which human beings can live in this area. Now, that's your list of thou shalt nots. We implemented a Perdido Key master plan. And so we've got all of the disincentivizing, right? We want to disincentivize the undesired behavior, and that's what an HCP does. By implementing a master plan, what we're then telling that developer class, and when we're then telling those people who want to, okay, so I know what I can't do, what can I do? By making a fully compatible list of things that you can do and that we as the government will actually help you to do if you will build and develop in these ways. Then we have the whips, the punishment side, but we've added to that the carrot and the incentive side. And in our case out on Perdido Key, we haven't had to do a whole lot in terms of cash incentives or tax incentives, because of the real quality aspect, and these incentives kind of incentivize the developers to build higher quality and lower density, which of course increases the overall profit. We're on the right side of the developer question. So the real success that we've had, I think, in implementing the Perdido Key Habitat Conservation Plan is to just get ourselves away from the idea that this is the stuff that mom and dad said I can't do, and so I'm angry. Okay, we stick our bottom lip out for a little while, but then you kind of wake up and you say, okay, what can I do? What can we do? And then where the government is not sitting there and just giving you that list of negatives, but instead also focusing on the positives, we have actually seen new developers, more sophisticated developers who are like-minded with regard to that environment, to using the environment as a marketing tool, as a part of their business model. Those are the developers that we want to incentivize, and we want to hold them up on a pedestal. We want to enable that kind of smart development. Why is this important to us? Every one of these HCPs, I think in your communities, has probably been a fight to some extent. Because we're fighting battles one after another, and we're fighting each of these battles as if that's the first and the last one. But when we actually create an environment in which we evolve the developer class, and involve the developer class, and we evolve them to the point where they are looking at environmentalism as a value model, then what we're talking about is cultural change. And as much as we all throw our backs into it and fight the good fight, I see Kent Wimmer here sitting here who, if you ever thought for a minute that you'd have a commissioner from Escambia County and Kent Wimmer actually talking nicely to one another, we go from this, think about all of the energy that we put into battles and conflict between these two ends of the seesaw, and instead have them working together. That's cultural change. That's a cultural change that takes all of the energy that we're currently spending on adversarial behaviors and turns it into cooperative and collaborative behaviors. And if you think about it, even when we talk about getting along with one another, we're still talking about and using the word compromise. Well, compromise, by its definition, means that I get some of what I want and you get some of what you want. But either way, it doesn't leave anybody 100% satisfied. We need to go ahead and throw that idea out as well. Because if we will replace compromise with a collective impact model, and that is really what you're starting to see out on Perdido Key, the developer is enabled to build a better product, to sell a better product, because they embrace the environmentalism. Now you have a collective impact model whereby I have developers approaching me and saying, hey, I'm really looking to do these things, how can I tie that into, say, the Perdido Key bike path or all of these other things? So the Perdido Key Master Plan, I think, is the first tool in implementing a master plan for your communities, if it's appropriate. I mean, obviously, one size fits none, we know that, right? By implementing a master plan that changes that relationship with the developer class, you may well have an opportunity to make them a part of your solution and not a part of the problem. The Perdido Key Master Plan that we had put in place, we did it through a process of charrettes, again, using that collective impact model. Everybody, I don't care how crazy you are left or how crazy you are right, come to the table and let's start, let's run through what we want our community to look like. And by allowing all the citizens to embrace the process from the beginning, we didn't have to go through a phase of building consensus, because consensus was built from the very beginning. You had developers and environmentalists, you had liberals and conservatives and every other, whatever, this versus that you can think of in our society, rich versus poor, whatever, all at the table and working on that master plan together. So if you think of a master plan of development for your HCP areas that will enable and incentivize developers to embrace and not fight, because quite frankly, none of us win when we all go to court. Well, actually, any lawyers in the house? Yeah, they win every time we go to court. But the rest of us don't. And each time that we do this, you have to understand, as a politician, my biggest concern is finding ways to create harmony in the community. So regardless of who wins in a court battle, we are one step further away every time we fight from that harmony that we're trying to build in the community. We hired a company called Andres Duane's company, DPZ, came in and they wrote the master plan for us. Basically by holding these charrettes and these processes that got everybody in a very open process, creating that master plan. Now that master plan is in place, it dovetails with the HCP. And things that are beneficial to advancing the ACP move through the permitting process faster. So my thinking, if I can leave you with really any part of what our success here on Perdido has been, it is that by leveraging and really focusing, taking a look at that guy across the table and the ones that you've been fighting with and the ones who've been fighting against you, and see if you can find a way to turn that into an incentive-based process with a master plan or some other type of leverage, so that everything does not always fall back to that negativity. I hope that gives you a little bit of something that you can work with. I will tell you that Tim's going to be here with you for most of the day as a politician. Obviously, I go from, I go where I'm told. But very happy to sit down with any of you and give you some of the advice and counsel that came from our experience of implementing that habitat conservation plan that has evolved us from an adversarial role to a collective impact role. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Underhill. You do have some time for questions?
I do,
That's my understanding. So we're actually have two microphones. I'm going to hand this one to Shannon, and I'll grab the other one from the podium. So raise your hand, and one of us will get to you with a microphone.
Hi, my name is Patricia Marchand. I'm Executive Director of HCP in California. And I was wondering, during this process, what the most difficult discussion you had was, or about the plan, or during implementation, any part of the process, and how you resolved it. And also, if you any advice, we're just beginning stages of implementation, so if you have any advice beyond developing a master plan or something similar to that we can take home and use.
Okay, excellent. So the first part of the question, what was the hardest part of the dialogue and how did we resolve it? We have something fairly unique about Escambia County and the coastal living here on the Gulf Coast. The BP event, while that was a man-made catastrophe, we're fairly accustomed to catastrophes here, as you've just recently seen to our neighbors to the east. And when we have these types of things happen as often as they do, it creates a resiliency of the people that live here. But also in the wake of a catastrophe, you don't really care about the color or gender or anything else about the person handing you that bottle of water when you need one. So we already have a kind of a predisposition to getting together. So, you know, actually it's in times of hurricanes and things that actually brings out the best in our culture. The hardest part was actually convincing some of the folks that were very well entrenched and were profiting from the old way that in fact the new way is better. And sometimes, yeah, that's cultural change. Okay, so that's going to be something that is not, there's not a kind of an aha moment, and it's not a linear progress. You know, but you keep whittling away at the stone all the time. But then the other hardest thing about the implementation is politics runs from one campaign season to the next. And so often our political environment is focused on what can I get done in time to put on the next billboard or on the next postcard for the next election. What we're talking about here with HCPs and with master plans and this kind of cultural change, you don't get to put those wins on the board in time for the next election. So each time that an election cycle comes up, you have to proactively sell this idea again. And it's very easy when, you know, some of your successes are glacial in nature. It's very easy for our press to fail to pick up on them. So you have to look at every political season as an opportunity to proactively sell the successes and the activities that are going on. And honestly, I give myself no better than about a C on that. You know, because if you want to do cultural change, you have to understand that the dialogue has to be constant, because as soon as the dialogue stops, then people will revert back to what they previously known. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Great question.
Edmund Sullivan, also from California, and thank you for coming here and speaking. Sorry. Edmund Sullivan, also from California, the San Jose area, and thank you. It's always inspiring to see local politicians really committed to this process. We also represent local communities, but there's also state and federal legislators, your peers at the state and federal level, that we're always trying to sell this process to, whether they're Democrat or Republican. And I was wondering, I thought you were very passionate in your presentation and sincere, you know, engaging with those state and federal officials that sometimes need a paradigm shift themselves. So I was just wondering, have you done that, or have you thought about doing that?
Well, yes, we absolutely do that. Great question is, you know, take your local politician, and one of the things that, you know, the further, we tend to think of moving up to the state level and then moving up to the federal level. Again, we need a new paradigm. That's not how it works. The government that is closest to the people, this is the highest level of government, in my opinion. I have much more luxury of time than Congressman Gates does to focus on these issues. So each of those politicians at those higher levels are very dependent upon local politicians from their own party and from the other party as well to inform them. So I do spend a lot of time on that, you know, in trying to, you know, advance those ideas and really to nick them down. It's truly unfortunate. You know, I'm a cyber and technology guy by trade. Okay, I can sit. I mean, there is no 30-second answer to any of the hard questions like how do you secure the internet, right? There's no 30-second answer to that. Just as with your profession and trade, there is no 30-second answer. The unfortunate reality is that the political world very rarely gives you much more than 30 seconds to answer. So it does require, you almost need a Rosetta Stone between the science and the importance of the HCPs into the very fast-paced and sometimes not very cranial business of politics. So I would say that you actively seek out those local politicians who can speak both of those languages, or the one who speaks the political language well and has the ability to learn. But also make sure that when the chips are down, that you're still there advising and assisting and helping. even if every time that you walk away from that politician, you're thinking, that's son of a, and you want to unload. There are people in this community that are on the extreme far left end of the spectrum compared to me that I still call up every time because I want to know, if nothing else, I want to know how I'm going to be attacked by the other side. Okay? So if you sell your value proposition as the environmentalist, as the scientist, to those local politicians who do have a willingness to hear that, you'll find yourself a very valuable asset to them. Believe it or not, as much as we try to make it look like we know everything, the truly capable politician knows very little about anything, but knows a lot of people who know everything about that thing. If you can make yourselves a part of that toolbox for those politicians, your party, the other party, somewhere in the middle, somewhere on a fringe, doesn't matter, that gives you the opportunity to enable them to be better at their job, and in the process will also make you more aware of the limitations of yours as well. Does that answer your question? Thanks.
Councilman Doug Wheeler from Washington, with follow on to your earlier comments about communicating the benefits of the HCP. Well, we had a session this morning on that topic, and I'm wondering what you are doing with regard to Perdido Key, in which you can enunciate the benefits and communicate those benefits, both environmental and economic. Part one. Part two, given the long life of the HCP, as you just described, how do you maintain that momentum politically? Your fellow elected officers may or may not know the origins of the HCP, may or may not subscribe to its objectives, but you've got to project that success over a long period of time.
Wow, excellent questions, and I'm going to take the second one first. I don't know how that energy and passion continues beyond my tenure as the commissioner from that district. This was the energy that led to me even deciding to be in politics. How do you pass that on to the next and the next and the next? Because ours, what do we have, 20 years left in ours, Tim? I can guarantee you I have no interest in being in politics 20 years from now. So what does that mean? What it means is we have to continually grow our leaders to be sensitive to and aware of the value of the HCP. Now, that takes me back to your first question. The first question is really, what was the value proposition? How do we sell the value of the HCP? We had the benefit of, and Kent, I'm going to try to put ice cream on this thing. So it was a very combative environment that caused our HCP to come into place. After a lawsuit from Kent's organization, we that really created a moratorium on building on Perdido Key for some period of time. An excellent move in the politics of environment. My hat's off to you for the brilliance of what you did. It happened at a time when Florida was really suffering and really feeling the loss of old Florida. We were seeing the concrete wall of condos go up in the neighborhoods to our east and west. And so we saw Orange Beach and Gulf Shores, Alabama build out. So the HCP, while somebody might not care one whit about a beach mouse, if buying that property means that the condo will never be built there, there's the value added for those folks. So we had a lot of people really that were kind of a middle class America, blue collar folks that had lived in that area for quite some time, but were being squeezed off of their own island by the economic forces that were at play. It was a matter of, and what we did is I just kind of listened to what people's concerns were. Not everybody had a concern about a beach mouse, but they did have a concern about the habitat. They were just using different words than we were using. So by listening to those concerns that the citizens had in the area, and then seeing how that dovetailed with the actions of the HCP, it turned out we were all pretty close to on the same sheet of music. We just didn't know it. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're going to have to quantify those benefits over time.
Over time, you absolutely have to quantify them over time. And in politics, it's the boogie. It's like if you've got a boogeyman to work against, it's always real easy. Unfortunately, that's like the lowest common denominator of politics. That is to politics what a pun is to humor. It's just the basis existence of our political lives. And why do we keep going back to that? Because it's so darn effective. But with all that hate and anger, and with that boogeyman, you can tear things down, and you can stop things, but you cannot build things, and you cannot move things forward. So we have to evolve. We have to have a better sales pitch. We have to have a better value proposition for the citizens other than boogeyman, because the further away from the boogeyman you get, the less effective that type of politics is. And I tell you what, I long for a day in America when boogeyman politics and hate politics is not how we do business. There's just so much work to be done in the middle that stuff out on the edges is kind of useless, in my opinion. So, sorry, I digressed.
That's fine. We have time for one more question, if anyone has one. No?
You had mentioned that over time, the developers came around to the value of developing under the HCP. Was that, as far as your work, was that changing the minds of the owners and developers that were already there and owned that property? Or was that those individuals or companies selling to developers that were coming in with another viewpoint and then saw the potential?
So I'm going to bask for a moment in the fact that you use the past tense, because the coming around process is still active. It's still ongoing. The question is, what was what really made the developers come around, and did you see that in local developers, those who were already here, making that kind of change of heart, change of mind, or was it the infusion of newer, more sophisticated developers, or I don't know if that's necessarily the proper word, but newer developers who were able to embrace the HCP, from the outset? And I think it's a combination of both, because many of the developers that were already working in the Perdido area were also, it's kind of like it's a little bit like a drug. You get out there and you realize every time you come back over the bridge, you're like, why am I leaving this place again? So some of those developers, they came out to make money, and in fact, they made a home. So we saw there was that change, but also we had the benefit of the run-up. We had a lot of property changed hands during the financial collapse, and that brought some new developers into town who were more familiar with HCPs and more capable of operating with that environment. But I will tell you that it is a process that continues every single day. Showing them, I'll tell you that for the developer, the thing that they are the most scared of is not a big long set of rules. It's the fear that those rules are going to change somewhere between permit and certificate of occupancy. The Habitat Conservation Plan and the Perdido Key Master Plan along with it sets in stone a set of rules. And with that comes a tacit promise from Escambia County that we're not going to move the goalposts on you. When you make your investments up front and when you take the risk of your capital up front, you're going to know exactly what you're getting into. Now, the market may not be so kind to you, but the government of Escambia County will hold you to these rules from the very beginning to the very end. And when you get to the very end, the rules are going to be exactly what they were when we set out. That certainty. That's one of the things that a Habitat Conservation Plan and the master plan along with it puts in place is certainty. And where there is certainty, those developers have the ability to make decisions and risk that capital. Does that answer your question? Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. And again, please enjoy as much of Escambia as you can while you're here. You're out on Pensacola Beach. This is our built-up beach. If you do not take the opportunity to get out to Perdido Key and see what we've done out there, what we're doing out there, then you will have missed out on because the best side is the west side here in Escambia County. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think it's safe to say that Tim is